Before we get started, I wanted to share with you um, a Christmas present that I bought myself. So this is as you can see, this is a box of cards. It's called Visual Frameworks. Can everybody see this? It's Visual Frameworks, and about a few months ago, I happened to come across this campaign on Kickstarter. You know what Kickstarter is, like it's a crowdfunding platform where people put up their products and people could can kind of fund them. So this is a gentleman by the name of David Gray. I don't know who he is, but he put up this campaign on Kickstarter, and he said he's making a deck of cards called Visual Frameworks. And apparently, I think he's a design thinking person, or he's a facilitator of some kind. And this deck of cards essentially is like a set of prompts that helps you think about certain things in with a different perspective, or creatively, whatever you kind of however you want to use them. So for example, let me just open this up. For example, each card has some kind of illustration. This one is funnel. This one is something called a gain map. I don't know what that means. There are these others called, there's a maze. So essentially what this is they're just basically prompts that help you think of situations differently, right? And I like tools like this. Like, for example, like, let's say you're making an important decision and you need some kind of different way to think about it. There are ways that you can there are certain prompts that you could use. Um, there's a website, associated website with this deck called visualframeworks.com. That's visualframeworks.com, where they've talked about this, and they have specific tags on which card to use for which type of problem or which situation you're in. So if you're trying to figure out what matters in your business, for example, there are certain cards that they'll help you, prompt you to think about certain things. How do you make a good decision? How do you track progress? How do you create a plan? Et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to share this because, as independent workers, independent consultants, most of us are independent. Some of us have small consulting firms that we run, but mostly we're independent professionals. And when we're in that situation, in this situation that we're in, loneliness and isolation is a real thing, right? We're not in a corporate setup where we interact with a lot of peers. Especially as consultants, when we get projects and we do engagements, we kind of oftentimes, at least when I was doing management consulting, I would just get head down into doing client delivery work. And that could be quite taxing. And it would be weeks before I interact with a peer of any sort about anything in general, right? Like in an office environment, you come across, they would have some kind of training of some sort. They would have some kind of, a speaker that would come in and talk about something. Somebody else, in the next cubicle will talk about whatever they're working on. So there's a lot of stimulation to help you think, in different ways. But for us, it's different. And that's one of the things I missed. So I kind of look at, ways in which I could reduce my loneliness and isolation as an entrepreneur, not as an individual. I have a great family and friends to keep me from being lonely, but in this profession of consulting and independent expertise, it can get pretty lonely. And I like to the two ways that I address this issue. One is I join a lot of groups, a lot of peer groups. Like a lot of you are here, perhaps because you feel the same way and you kind of want to, interact with other people, learn about other stuff. So I'm part of a lot of groups, right? So I do that. And then I do things like this that will help me kind of spark a different part of my brain, make me more creative, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to share that with you as more people come in. Cool. So here's how this is going to work. I see a lot of new faces. This is episode or session number 40 of the Consulting Growth Hour. We've been doing this for a number of months now. And the purpose of these sessions is to introduce you to various concepts in consulting that will help you grow, right? It's a pretty simple concept. And I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as we move forward. And if you've attended these sessions before, you'll know that I like to keep these sessions very focused and about the topic at hand and focused on you folks, because I'd like you to get maximum value out of these sessions. And feel free to ask questions, right? There's a chat box, so feel free to ask questions. And if I feel that it's relevant to answer the question then and there, then I'll take up the question. If not, I usually like to take questions at the end. But feel free to type in the chat whenever you want. For starters, as we get going, I like to do this. I see a lot of new folks in the audience, so type in the chat and let me know what type of consulting you do and who you serve. So as and when I need examples to give you, I like to learn using examples. I have a few examples that I'm going to be talking about today. But if there's a particular type of consultant in the audience, and if I find that I can use that type of consulting as an example for one of the concepts that I'm talking about, then I'll gladly, take that piece of information. So type in the chat again, and let me know what type of consulting you do and who you serve, your ideal type of organization or buyer. Okay, cool. So let's get started. So unlocking consulting growth, we're going to be talking about client retention and revenue expansion, a pretty exciting topic. Growth is always an exciting topic. So let's talk about profitable consulting for a bit. Now, I'll give you, as I said, a little bit of information as to what I did as a management consultant and the company I ran. But here's my learning about profitable consulting, right? Now, depending on which study you believe, landing a new customer is around 5 to 25 times more expensive than retaining an existing one. Let that sink in for a bit. And some of you may have heard of this, but it just makes sense, does it not? Like in our profession, especially, and I'm generalizing a little bit. I don't know exactly what you folks do, but typically in consulting, you go from project to project, engagement to engagement, sometimes lasting, 6 months, even sometimes less than 6 months, or maybe 6 times to a year. And then you got to go find another client, right? Sometimes if you're lucky, you get into a space where you get repeat business from the same client, but oftentimes most consultants, business to business consultants, whether you're a strategy consultant, operations, HR, data consultant, IT. Okay, IT, maybe, there are ways that you can kind of keep the your client, because you have managed services, you have other types of arrangements that you could do. But even IT, I worked with several IT consultants, and a lot of the times they don't know how to retain clients, although IT is, in my opinion, has some advantages in terms of retention. But any kind of business to business consultant in general, you go from project to project, and when you land a project, you're so heads down in delivering that project or engagement, and you don't have a plan to land your next client. And when you're current engagement ramps down, that's when you kind of wake up and realize that you need a client very fast. Otherwise, you're going to have these gaps in revenue, which are pretty hard. And then you get into that roller coaster income, which is pretty common in our world. So I see some comments. So thanks, David. Thanks, Nasser, for your comments, and Mohan as well. Keep those comments coming. Let me know who you serve and what type of consulting you do. Right. So getting back to the premise of profitable consulting, right? That's the first one, is about new customer acquisition and how expensive, how much more expensive it is than retaining an existing one. Increasing customer retention rates by 5%, right? Increasing customer retention rates by 5% increases profitability by 25 to 95%. This is a quote I keep using a lot. If you've been following my content on LinkedIn for a while, and I've been creating content for a few years, and this is a quote that I keep using a lot. And this was by some research done by Frederick Reichheld from Bain, and in collaboration with Harvard Business School. And just by a small percentage point of retention, a small percentage point in retention increases profits by 25 to 95%, which is staggering, right? Like, once you know the statistics, you realize how important client retention is. So the bottom line is, retaining customers is valuable, right? That's what it's all about. And we're here in this session, we're going to be talking about how to do that. What are the core elements? What are the models of client retention? What are the elements, the softer elements of client retention? And beyond that, how do you build a relationship with a client and grow your sales? Cool. So given the premise that we talked about, it's expensive to land more customers. It is a small percentage in retention. Customer retention increases profits by 25 to 95%, and retaining customers is obviously valuable. So with that premise, a couple of key questions come to mind. How do you retain a consulting client? And how do you grow sales and revenue at the same time, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So very briefly about me, like I said, I don't want to take too much time, but for those of you in the audience that don't know me, I'm a former management consultant. I started my consulting firm, Springboarders, here in Toronto in 2009, just at the start of the Great Recession. And ran the company for about 10 to 11 years, and I've sold over 200 consulting engagements. My our specialty in my firm was strategic planning, and within strategic planning, I ended up specializing in a strategic planning for scientists and researchers within academic institutions, right? Those large universities were my main client. And researchers and scientists and academics used to come up with various ideas. So my consulting firm used to help them either launch startups or license their technology to larger companies for distribution, right? So that was my focus. And other than that, I've also sold, like, as I was trying to, I was growing my company, and we realized that in 3 months of the year, in the summer, academic institutions were pretty slow. So we lost some business during those times. So we built another line of business, which was using strategic planning, our expertise, and helped various other types of companies, small businesses, mid-sized businesses, to plan, to build a strategy, and to grow. And as a former corporate consultant myself, I worked in management consulting for other boutique strategy firms. And I've, had the experience of working with Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, both provincial, federal, municipal governments as well. So across and nonprofits as well. So in my consulting career, I've served many different types of clients. And so using that information, I now help and work exclusively with independent consultants and management consulting firms to help them grow their sales pipeline and add new clients to their business. I do this through my firm, Consulting Leap. So one of the reasons I started Consulting Leap is because a lot of my friends in the industry that used to talk to me used to say, how do you get the next client? How do you build a pipeline? That seemed to be the biggest problem, right? Consultants are generally very, very good at what they do. They're excellent at their field and their domain. That's why they become consultants in the first place. But they very quickly realize that they don't know how to build a pipeline. And that is the problem that I solve through Consulting Leap. Okay. So let's get into client retention. I see some other comments as well. Natasha, Business Solutions Consulting. Thanks for your comments. We'll get into some examples, hopefully using some of your situations. So let's talk about client retention. I'm talking about 3 models here. And there may be other models, but this is what I believe are out there in the market, which I feel a lot of you consultants in the room today, and those of you listening to the recording on YouTube or on the podcast can apply, right? And the models that I'm showing you here are all the ones that I've used in my consulting firm. And I know they work, and I know that they can help you build a profitable practice. Okay. So model number 1 is what I call the strategic narrative, right? So when you retain clients, right, you want to retain them for a number of years. For me, for many reasons, and I'm not going to get into it, I like to keep clients for 2 years, and then I would, look for another client. But there are many consultants who want to retain clients for a longer period of time, right? And whether you want to do it for a couple of years or you want to do it for more than 2 years, this idea of having a strategic narrative for your consulting firm as a whole helps you retain clients for a longer period of time. So let's get into this. What exactly do I mean by strategic narrative? Your strategic narrative is a story. It's a story that you use to communicate why you exist in the first place. When I say story, it's not something made up. It's not something fake. It is a narrative that you help people and help your audience understand why you exist in the first place, why your consulting firm exists in the first place. And there are 2 big parts of a narrative. Number 1 is a big, thorny problem. I'm going to get into an example very soon, but just stay with me here for the concept, right? There are 2 big parts, as I said, of a strategic narrative. On one side, you have a big, thorny problem, right, that your potential clients and the market in general faces, right? On the other side, you have a dream outcome that the market wants. They have a huge, thorny problem that is a huge impediment or a challenge to growth or to whatever outcome that they want. And they want to get to that outcome. They have a dream outcome that they want to get to. And you build your narrative understanding your market's big problem, the big thorny problem, and also understanding what their dream outcome is, right? So client retention starts way earlier than when you even, meet a client and kind of pitch your services and so on, and start delivering the work. Client retention starts from really making it very clear and being very clear as to why you exist in the first place, right? And that realization and that information only comes to you when you have a deep understanding of the market. You have a deep understanding of the market only when you speak with customers, do research, understand their world, understand the challenges that they're going through, and understand where they want to go, what their dream outcomes are, right? And for consultants, this is not as challenging. Let me tell you why. Because we consultants are experts in our domain. A lot of the times we have lived the problem that our current clients are now facing. For example, I just told you that I had a management consulting firm, and I know what it's like to build a pipeline for a consulting firm. I know from a consulting firm's owner, right, from a partner or an independent consultant, what that's like. And essentially right now, my business consulting leap helps people that I once was, right? Helps the kind of people that I've lived through. For consultants, understanding a market problem is far easier than someone who's just a founder of a tech company. They have some tech skills and they're trying to kind of find a market for their technology, right? So because we are domain experts, we come from that world and we understand the problem. Okay, let's look at some examples. I just need to minimize this thing. Let's look at the first comment from David Lee. David Lee says, I help healthcare, nonprofits, startups, biotech raise funds, set up optimized multi-sector collaborations, and provide public speaking coaching for scientists and technical experts. So a bunch of things over there, but let me just take the healthcare, nonprofit, startups, biotech raise funds. So without knowing David, I can come to a conclusion that you know that market intimately, and you have helped that market raise funds in some kind of past life, which has given you domain expertise. And is that right, David?
Yeah, that's right. I've raised about $50 million and worked mostly on the nonprofit side, but also worked in industry. So I think also bring knowledge on how to improve and get your best foot forward in terms of a value proposition for investment.
Perfect. Right. So you have domain expertise, right? And because of that domain expertise, now you have chosen to become a consultant or an advisor and help organizations that need this problem and use your expertise to help them, right? So that's what I mean when I say, yeah. Thanks for that, David. Thanks for coming on.
Sure. Yep, of course.
And that's what I mean when I say that consultants are at an advantage in understanding what their clients want. But understanding is one thing, but taking that strategic narrative, taking that understanding and building a strategic narrative is quite another thing. Now, building a strategic narrative is a big topic on its own. So if you really want to get deep into how to build a strategic narrative, I've done a session on this before. Go to my YouTube channel, just type in Consulting Leap. You'll find a playlist called Consulting Growth Hour, and find session number 28 of this Consulting Growth Hour series, which is dedicated to building a strategic narrative. There are various elements of doing that, but for this session, I'm not going to get into the details, but I'll show you an example that can kind of help you get the concept a little better, right? Cool. So let's say, and for those of you listening on the podcast, I'm sharing slides here. So the recording of this is on the YouTube channel. So go ahead and check out episode number 40, and I'm on slide number 9. So this is an example of a strategy consulting firm that wishes to build a strategic narrative about the reason they exist, and kind of relay that narrative or story to the market. So they start with the big thorny problem. The big thorny problem that this firm has identified is that their companies, they're not their companies, but their clients' companies, the client organizations are losing market share and profitability due to poor go-to-market strategy. Now, if you haven't heard that term before, don't get confused. I'm just trying to illustrate a point here saying that they have identified a big thorny problem. For your type of consulting business, your clients may have a big thorny problem that is quite different, but this is just an example. So this strategy consulting firm has identified that firms in their market are losing market share and profits due to poor go-to-market strategy. And when they look at their dream clients, what is the dream outcome these clients want? The answer to that, they realize, is that their clients want to outperform industry peers and increase enterprise value, which is the value of the business, increase enterprise value by 2x or double enterprise value, right? That's what they want. That's what these companies want. And right now, they're just simply losing money and market share. They're losing money hand over fist because they just don't have the right strategy, right? So now a strategy consulting firm, to build this narrative, they're going to be building their story based on this, the big thorny problem and the dream outcome. They're going to be talking about it, and they're going to be basing their entire methodology and business around it, right? So what really happens here, and how this translates into client retention, is that when you choose a big problem to focus on, a huge problem in the marketplace, and then you put together a solution to solve that problem in multiple phases, that could lead to working with that client for a longer period of time and solve that problem of going from project to project. A lot of the times we don't have a solution to a specific market problem. We meet a potential client and they say that, they're facing X problem or Y problem. And then we go back and say, let me put together a proposal for you. And you do a custom engagement, which is 6 months or 3 months or 9 months or whatever that is. And then you meet another client who says, I have this X problem or Y problem. Can you do something for me? Then you go back and you do another project with them, right? So what I recommend is to think about, be solution oriented rather than, becoming an order taker, right? You don't want to be, you can start off your consulting business being an order taker. Fine. I did it myself, but you want to transition into positioning yourself as an expert who really understands the client's problem and where they want to go, and then has a solution for that problem, right? So when you become solution oriented and you go to the market saying that, hey, I know what your problem is. I know exactly what you're going through. I know the challenges. I know what you're fed up with. I know the root causes. I know where you want to go. I know that, that place, the dream outcome that you want, and I know how to get there. And here's how. So when you approach the market from that angle, you're approaching it from the perspective of an expert and someone who has the authority, right? When people understand your strategic narrative, and if your narrative is built well, they'll start resonating with it. They'll say, yes, this is the problem, right? I have, and this person is talking about this problem. I want to listen. I want to have a conversation with them, right? And then when you have a conversation with them, you can take them through these steps of how you're going to help them go from the big thorny problem to their dream outcome. Now, what I'm going to show you on this slide is something that I just made up because I know strategy consulting firms. I've ran a firm myself, right? So this is something that I just made up, but it could be the steps that a strategy consulting firm can take to take their market from that situation where they're in a big problem, whether a big tiny problem, to that dream outcome. And here's the steps, right? So these steps phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I call them the assessment phase, ambition, aim, action, and ascent, right? So this consulting firm has put together their own intellectual property and come up with a methodology for how, or a framework for how they solve a problem, right? And you guys have a consulting business as well, or a consulting firm, or a slightly larger consulting firm. We love frameworks, we love methodologies, right? You may have some kind of methodology of how you solve a problem, and that becomes that is born out of your IP. So all I'm trying to say over here is that you want to have your own methodology, your own intellectual property that shows your potential clients how you get them from their current problematic situation to their dream outcome that they so desperately want to achieve. When you start talking in terms of a solution, and when you start attacking big problems in the market, and you show them a path, you show them phases, the likelihood of you retaining that client goes up, because each phase leads to the next. In this situation, in this example, the assessment phase, every consulting organization that I know of at least starts off with some kind of an audit or an assessment in the beginning, right, to understand the current situation. The assessment phase would lead into, in this example, the ambition phase. The ambition is when, for strategy, for building strategy, you want to build, the vision of the organization, what the values are, the mission, and all those big ideas. Then from there, you go to phase 3, which is, starting from the vision and the mission and the values of the organization, you put together strategic initiatives or strategic imperatives, right? And from there, you go to phase 4, which is action planning. Who's going to do what? What's the budget? What's the timeline? And then the final phase is the ascent, where you kind of support them on a periodic basis to either implement all of this stuff or simply be there as they wish to change their plan or change their strategy, right? So what happens here is that you present them with one step, and then once that step is done, there's an incentive for them to move to the next step. And once that step is done, there's an incentive for them to move to the next step. And as a result, you're taking them step by step, and you're solving this big problem in the market, and the big problem that your client has, that they desperately want to solve. And that is the most productive way that I know of, at least, to retain a client. This way, you become an authority as well. The more and more you solve these problems at your client organizations, you become more of an authority as well, and you build a name for yourself in this space. So for those of you live, type in the chat. Let me know if this is making sense, or I'm just off my rocker here, and this is not making any sense at all. I'd like some feedback. So let me know in the chat if this is making sense, and then we'll move on to the next model, or I can answer some questions if you feel that this warrants some more information. So Chris says you're on. Joey says makes sense. Okay, good. So that's one way of retaining clients, and this is exactly what my firm did. I had a 5-step process where I did strategic planning, and this is exactly what I did. I've just changed the names a little bit, and you can see that I've chosen, for each step, I've chosen a word that begins with A. That's just, it's just a way of differentiating yourself. It's just a way for clients to remember each step, or remember your methodology, and so on. It's a cosmetic thing, but still, it's a branding thing as well. And your framework, the easier it is to remember, the easier it is for clients to implement it and then get results, right? So that's one way to retain clients. Let's talk about another model. This is what I call a client the client's, accessing the client's stakeholder network. So think of, now this is an interesting one, because a lot of the times as consultants, we go after individual businesses, individual organizations. Let's take an example. So David said, we took David's example. Now let's take Joey's example. Joey says he's an operations consultant, operations of a service-based organization such as contractors, doctors, lawyers, and professional services. Okay, so Joey, you've said that you're some type of an operations consultant for a service-based organization, and your clients could be contractors. Your clients could be individual contractors, contracting organizations, could be individual professional services firms, etc. And that's how we all start, and that's how we all land new business. You go from organization to organization, right? But what if you could think of your clients as, you could choose your clients to be those that could then put you on to their own network. For example, in my consulting business, my main client, the folks that paid my bills, were the universities, big universities. And within the universities, my client, the client that I worked with, was the commercialization department. Like most universities have a commercialization department where they would take up all these inventions and ideas that the scientists and researchers would come up with, and they would commercialize them, right? Either build a startup within the university, or license that technology to a larger company for distribution deals. So my client was the commercialization department in the university. But who I actually ended up working with was the individual researcher or scientist within the university, right? And every 6 to 12 months, I would work with each of those companies for 6 to 12 months, or sometimes even a little longer. But I never approached those academics myself, right? My client was the university, and they would put me on to the big network. So you see, a retention model is also, even if you have a service that you can only apply for 6 months and then you're done, right? Or 1 year and then you're done. If you had a larger client that put you on to their network of organizations or sister organizations, then you still have the possibility or the opportunity to be retained. Now, for Joey's example, now I don't know your business at all, Joey, so I'm just making an assumption here, so forgive me if this is wrong. You said you work with professional services firms, so now doctors and lawyers. Now, what if you could liaise with associations of lawyers or professional services firms, and say to them that, hey, I have a specific service for operations, and you can, I will work with you, and then you put me on to affiliated companies, to organizations that are affiliated with you, so I could work with them directly. So then you have a relationship with that association, or network, and then you could have various types of clients coming to you from that network. Now, this is an example. I'm not saying that this is the answer to that specific situation, but I'm just using an example here. I have a client, and I had a client, a consulting client, that was another type of they used to help businesses of some sort. They liaised with government agencies that would then put them on to companies within their network. For example, here in Canada, there are many government agencies that work with consulting firms. And this client of mine worked with that government agency, many government agencies that would then put them on to organizations that were part of that industry or vertical or whatnot. So the government was, that agency was the client, but the actual end user of the consulting services used to change depending on who that agency brought in to the consulting firm. So with this model, you can have client retention as well, because that agency or the association or the university, as in my example, those were the clients, and then they gave me that benefit of retention. But the service was provided to other organizations, and those could be small. Sometimes they were smaller projects. Sometimes they were 3-month projects. Sometimes 6-month projects. Oftentimes they were 1-year projects, because I was using this strategy along with my strategic narrative strategy. We had a very strong strategic narrative where we could work with those researchers and academic companies for about a year or so. And I had this strategy, the client stakeholder network strategy, which was the universities. So you see, I had like a dual way of retaining clients, and that's why we had a very profitable consulting firm that just kept growing and growing. Like if you look at our trend line, we kept growing like this. Every time we added a new academic client, we would just keep going like this, right? We weren't going like this, which is the typical roller coaster income of a consulting firm. Right, that's what a retention strategy or using the right retention model can do for your business. I'm mindful of the time here, folks, so I want to move on. Now, this is an example. Now, this is subcontracting, the third one. Now, for a lot of folks in the room, this may not apply to you, but there may be some folks in the room that are just starting out. They've got a couple of clients, and they're just starting out in their consulting journey. Now, subcontracting is another way to find, to apply the principle of retention, client retention in your business. I'll give you another example. I'll give you an example of my situation as well. So when I started out my consulting business, even before I started focusing on universities, I was dabbling. I was trying to find my market, right? So through one of my contacts, I found a little larger consulting firm in my space. They were doing marketing strategy consulting. I was doing strategic planning. And what they were looking for some of their clients was market research services. So what I started to do was provide market research services for some of their clients. So this other firm, which was like it wasn't a competitor, but it was another consulting firm, started providing me with a pipeline of clients. So I did, several, 8 to 9 different consulting engagements through this other consulting firm as a subcontractor, right? So that is a way of client retention as well. And you can consider this if you're in the game, you're early in the consulting game, and you're thinking of ways of, retaining clients. So become a subcontractor and then serve your clients' clients, right? Okay, so those are the 3 models that I wanted to share with you, and these are the ones that I've predominantly worked with. So I'm sure there are other types of models of retention, but if you focus on these 3, at least the first 2, I think you'll be on your way to landing. To growing a pretty nice and profitable consulting business. But these are, as far as client results go, these are technical models of client retention. There's a softer side of client retention as well, which I definitely want to talk about. And I quickly want to show you. So these are the softer elements of client retention. These are important if you want to retain clients, right? And these are related to how you develop your relationship with the client, right? Because you're working closely with the client. What do you do in order to develop a good relationship with the client so that they retain you. You can have all the fancy technical models in the world, but if you are a lousy relationship builder, then they're not going to retain you, right? Consulting is a very high touch, face-to-face, relationship-based business. And you need to know how to build a relationship so that your clients retain you. So there are 5 elements of client retention, softer elements. Number 1, keeping your clients informed about the work that you're doing. It's basic. You want to keep the lines of communication open and keep them informed about what's going on as far as their engagements and projects are concerned. Right? A lot of the times we just simply don't keep them informed, and suddenly they wake up and say, "Hey, you know what? I never knew you were doing this. Or I never knew that this report was delayed, or this thing wasn't delivered." You never want that in a client relationship, right? So you want to over communicate. Number 2, owning up if you screw up. Again, this is a basic piece of communication. Just if there's something that goes wrong, you be the first one to let your clients know. Number 3, listening so you can do things before they ask. This is paramount. I love doing this for my clients. Like, even before they ask for something, I would be sending them an email, or I would be saying that, "Hey, you know what? This is something that you need to be doing. You said X or Y in our previous conversation. I thought this would be useful for you, so I'm just letting you know." And clients love that because they don't want to be chasing you to help them. They want you to help them and you to chase them and let them know what they need to be doing and how you can help. Right? For that, you need to be a very keen listener. It's a key part of client retention. Number 4, pointing them to new market opportunities. Again, this will help the client. This is just going above and beyond. If you find opportunities in the market that you know your client will benefit from, by all means, tell them. They will appreciate you for it. And they will find you reliable. They will find you a delight to work with, and they will want you on the team. It's a key part of client retention. And finally, introducing them to other resources that they can hire or partner with. If you have someone in your network that your client would benefit from, either as an employee, as a contractor, as a consultant, as a coach, or as a strategic partner, make the introduction. Your clients would appreciate it. So these are a few ways you can build relationships with your clients and increase the chances of client retention. All right, we have about 10 minutes. Any questions so far? I see some comments, so I'm just gonna quickly pop in the chat. So pop in the chat, let me know if there's any questions that you may need answered. So Ken says, what if you give a client what they have specifically asked for, then when the conclusions are drawn on the project, it turns out that this project is not what the client needs, and the output is frustration all around. Well, you got to have constant check-ins, right? Like, if you're going phase by phase, you want to ensure that the scope is being met, and the scope is everyone's kept abreast of what the final outcome is going to be. So you don't want the client to kind of wake up in the middle, especially if the economic buyer has signed off on a specific project or an engagement, and you're working with mid-management or the executive team or the exco or whoever, and you don't want them to wake up, and say that, this is something else, and the other buyer or the other person or stakeholder in the company says something else. So you want to keep the communication channels open, and you want to keep them abreast of every phase of the project. So in general, not knowing exactly what your situation was, Ken, I would say that this is a communication issue. And Ken, you say that in this example, the phases were followed. However, the stakeholders of the project were not following. Well, then there's some kind of a gap between what you offered and what they wanted, right? So if they signed up for those phases, then that's not your fault, right? If that's what if you delivered on what you said you would deliver, then that's not on you. And this may be just a one-off, Ken. Like it may be that the client is not the right ideal client for you, right? A qualified, a right ideal client is also a client that knows, likes, and trusts you. They need to be able to trust you enough for them to get you into the organization and complete the project. And if there's no trust there, and it sounds like there wasn't any trust here, then they're not the right client for you. That's how I would look at it. Okay, so if you've got about 9 minutes left, I want to get into the other part of the um, presentation. I see some other questions. I'm going to take them in the end. So let's get into the sales growth and revenue expansion piece. We've talked about client retention, right? But how do you now, with a retained client, how do you grow from there, and how do you kind of expand your revenue and grow your sales and so on, right? There are a few strategies that you can deploy, and I'm going to show you this slide. Those of you on the live presentation, and those of you looking at the YouTube channel, I'm going to show you this slide. It has a lot of information, so I'm going to let it just sit there for about 30 seconds, read it, and then I will explain to you what the elements are. So here you go. The 4 parts to consulting sales growth. Just let that sink in, and we'll come back in 30 seconds. Okay, so what you see on the screen it's a framework for paths to consulting sales growth. Now, there are 2 ways to increase revenue, right? You either increase volume or you increase price, right? The models you see here are specifically about volume, but how about sales growth? And this is a framework that I've used a lot in my consulting days. There are 4 ways to grow sales. Number 1, you grow in existing markets. So within the same market and using the same service. Number 2, you develop, your service, right? So you stay in the same market, but you have some kind of a new service. That's a way to grow. Number 3 is market development, where you choose a new market and you offer the same service. Number 4 is diversification, which is a new market and a new service. Now, for the purposes of the topic today, which is client retention, how do you grow sales with the same retained clients? I'm going to narrow this down to, are you seeing this thing on the right? Yes. So I'm going to narrow this down to this, these elements or these strategies that you see within this red box here on the screen. So, increase usage of service. That is, you grow with this in the same market and the same service. And number 2, service development. You create some kind of a new service, or you add on to your existing service and you offer it to your current clients. Now, it may sound confusing, but stay with me here, because it's a simple concept. Once you sink your teeth into it, you'll be able to think of different ways to, land new engagements with your current clients. Just opening up my notes here for this. Now, let's talk about increasing business within your current client. So you're using the same service. You're not developing a new solution or your consulting service. It's the same thing, but you want to grow that service within your current client, right? So there are a couple of things that you can do. You can increase the usage of that service, right? There are three ways to increase the usage of that service. Number one is frequency, right? And these are concepts that I've taken from the product world. In consumer product goods, for example, like, there are companies that will encourage you to use their product more, right? For example, a toothpaste companies would constantly say, don't brush 2 times a day, brush 3 times a day after each meal. So what they're essentially doing is they're trying to increase the frequency of the product and make them use that product, make you use that product more, right? So you can take that concept and see if it applies to your consulting business. Are there opportunities for your clients to increase the frequency of using your service, right? Does it apply to you? Not all of these concepts may apply to you, but think about them and ask yourself, does this apply to you? For example, can you do monthly workshops instead of quarterly workshops that you've promised your clients? If it actually benefits the client, and don't just do it because you just want to sell more, but will it serve your client to do more workshops or more facilitation events, if that's your business, on a monthly basis rather than a quarterly basis, if you're currently doing it in a quarterly basis. So that's an example of frequency. Let's go to quantity, right? Again, I'll use an example from the product world. Now, I wear glasses, and I've been buying glasses for, since I was 5 years old. That's when I started wearing glasses. And oftentimes, something new that I noticed, like over the past couple of years, is that, my where I buy spectacles from, now what they start doing is they encourage me to buy 2 pairs. I've never bought 2 pairs of spectacles. I always bought just 1 pair. But now the salespeople over there encourage me to buy 2. Say, buy 1 for, your formal events and for, work, and buy another for, casual events and so on. So they kind of encourage you to increase the quantity of your purchase. I'm the same customer. It's not like they're doing this to, they're trying to acquire a new customer, but they're trying to increase the quantity of how much they sell to the same customer, right? So can this concept apply in your consulting business? For example, if you sell to a group concern, you have group companies and you sell to one of the companies, can you expand your service, same solution, to other organizations in that group concern? So it's the same client, but you increase the quantity of your of what you offer to other departments or other group concerns and so on, right? Can you do that? Is there an opportunity there? Again, not all of these ideas may be relevant for your business, but just think about them. They may be. If they are, then think about how you can increase the quantity, right? Number 3, new applications. Okay, this one's interesting. Again, I'm going to take an example from the consumer product world, right? A few years ago, I don't know if they still do this, but Kellogg came up with this concept of, marketing breakfast cereal as a snack, right? Somebody in the organization realized that, consumers just use our product in the morning as breakfast cereal. Can we market this as a snack? So I think it was Kellogg or somebody else that, marketed a new application for their product, right? Now you can use, or you can have cereal as a snack, not just as breakfast. People consume cereal typically for breakfast, but now they started marketing it as a snack, right? So how can you use this concept for your consulting business? Let's say you have a design thinking agency, right? A design thinking agency, typically you work with product development departments or startups or companies like that who want to develop and market new products. Can you use your same principles and work with the HR department to improve their hiring strategies, for example, and the other processes? Or can you use design thinking in some other department of the business that would help them come to some kind of an outcome that they or achieve some kind of outcome that they want, right? So again, it's same service, same market, but finding a new application for the service, right? So these ways, through these, thinking about your retention and sales growth in these ways, you could possibly find one or two ideas that you can explore for your consulting business. Now let's go to the number two, which is service development, which is now same market. I understand that I'm gone a little over. It's just a little. It's about a minute past the hour, but I want to quickly complete this. Service development, being in the same market but having a new service, right? And it's not necessarily a brand new service. You can add features to an existing service. You could develop a new generation service, like you have, your 5-step framework or methodology. Maybe you can, do a 2.0 version of it, add something else which is relevant, not irrelevant stuff. Don't just do it to dress it up. But as long as it's relevant, maybe you can use some AI tools to make the process easier, right? So that's your 2.0 service. And then you can kind of, have a different pricing model for that, right? Develop a new generation service. You can also develop new services for the same market, right? So now you've had one service. Now you can create another solution that would attack some other kind of problem within the client organization. So you retain the client, but you offer a new service, right? Fine. So those are ways to think about sales growth and increase business from your existing client, right? I want to quickly go into questions. And I'm going to be around, so type in the chat. Let me know if you have some questions that I can answer. But right now, I'm looking at a question. So we answered Ken's question. David says, I found that pitching a fractional role rather than a discrete consulting deliverable helps build longer-term relationships and contracts. Absolutely, because as a fractional consultant, you're essentially an executive, right? You take up, so you're either a fractional COO or a fractional CFO, and you kind of help that company. You roll up your sleeves and you do the work for that company. So I have fractional providers as clients who have retained certain clients for about like 5+ years, and they're very happy with them, right? So fractional executives have a natural advantage when it comes to retention. So Chris says, what is the ideal company size to target on LinkedIn? You can target any company size, but in terms of buyers, right? Like now let's talk about firmographics, company sizes. Now, there are more small businesses than medium-sized businesses, and there are more medium-sized businesses than there are large companies. I define small businesses as companies under 1,000 employees. Medium-sized businesses are 1,000 to 5,000 employees. Large businesses are 5,000 and above, right? So by definition, I mean, there will be more small companies than medium-sized companies. So if you're looking at volume, you can target a lot of small companies on LinkedIn. And the advantage is that a lot of small company founders and executives are on LinkedIn, right? So you can build, I mean, depending on what area of expertise and what field you're in, there's a lot of small businesses on LinkedIn, medium-sized businesses as well. But the higher up you go, the problem on LinkedIn is that the executives and, economic buyers, C-level executives of large companies, and even some of the larger mid-sized companies are not always on LinkedIn as frequently as the small business folks are, right? So you can network with the directors and VPs and mid-level managers of these mid-sized and large companies. And I'm generalizing here a bit, but finding C-level buyers for large companies, especially the Fortune 500 companies, that's pretty tough on LinkedIn. Hector says, thank you, very clear. Thank you, Hector, for joining the community. Cool. So, well, for those of you who are still here, if you need more help, right, and you want to put these principles into action and add 100 to 500K in new consulting revenue within 12 months without burning out, then give me a shout. You can email me at fahimmusa.com, or you can go to consultingleap.com. And there's one more thing. If you're not in the market for taking on my help, as of now, what I'd love from you, for those of you, especially in the live audience and those of you watching the recording on YouTube, just type in the chat and type a comment, and let me know if this has been useful for you. And I'd love to use that testimonial and grow this community, because I'd like to grow this community of consultants. So if you're still around, type in the chat a couple of sentences about how you benefited from this session, if it was useful at all, and I'll be very grateful for that feedback.